All right, welcome everyone. Today we're talking about how to actually say no to pushy realtors, and not just realtors, but everyone through the home buying process who wants to tell you their opinion of what you should do. So today I asked a friend of mine, Ethan Martin, to come in here and to talk a little bit about his coaching program that he uses that I've been through that's fantastic. And he has a little segment in his course talking about how to say no to people in a way that's healthy for you and for them as well. So welcome, Ethan. How you doing, man?
Good, Kyle. Thanks for having me on. I'm really excited.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so just for a little bit of background, so can you tell us a little bit about your course? So you're the founder and lead coach for Elevate Your Edge, which is primarily kind of a coaching course for individuals looking to be more authentic and to bring more of themselves to their work and their life. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So it's been a journey to come to this course, but essentially it's now really around helping people elevate their mindset, skills, and tools to help them build a life they love. And it started for executives, where kind of my normal day job is coaching executives and organizations and intact teams. And it's branched out down all the way now to where I'm even working with high school students based on some of my adult clients say, hey, I have a 16-year-old, 20-year-old, 25-year-old student. Would you work with them? And so Elevate Your Edge really has become a program for people of all ages to help them really understand their most authentic self and help apply that to school, work, and life. So it's been really exciting to work with all these different age groups and teams and organizations and individuals like yourself. And the Elevate Your Edge program really now is a 60-day sprint where you walk through a course curriculum that we guide you. And then also something new since you were part of the group was actually now we have cohorts where after the course curriculum's over, people join cohorts of like-minded people to talk through these concepts. So it's been a work in progress, but really exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and I know we've talked about this in other videos before, but I know that your course is one of the things that kind of kickstarted me into, even on this YouTube channel, moving into more of this idea of bringing more authenticity and genuineness and the idea of calm into the videos as well, because you cover a ton of that, of like how do you actually bring your authentic self to the work that you're doing, and not kind of the buzzword authentic, but more of like how do I actually take the things that I'm working through and then also bring that to an audience that we're creating something together with. So in that course, you talked about this idea of like red light, yellow light, green light, which is something we all learned kind of as like a game in elementary school.
I play that game with my kids. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's been super helpful for me to think about communication in that way. Instead of like we like to complicate communication, I think, but that analogy really simplifies it in a way. And I thought it'd be incredible to talk about too inside of the home buying conversation. So often buying a home is so public and it can be really invasive. So not only are we talking with friends and family, we're talking with people who are looking at our finances, people who are walking into homes with us who are basically strangers for us at that point. And so it can be really easy to hear all these outside voices and then to get caught up in them a little bit. I like to think of it in a way of if you were kind of sitting beside a river and you dip your toe in the water and you don't realize that river is actually like coming way faster than you thought it was, and you kind of get swept up in everything if you don't have a good footing. So could you talk a little bit about what is this red light, yellow light, green light analogy, and how does it actually apply to communication and setting up healthy boundaries?
Yeah, it really came through the program because I see that people have the tendency to weight all voices and opinions in their life as relatively equal. And especially when you talk about the home buying process, you're working with people that literally have an expertise that you don't have. And so typically we listen to their advice, or at least their advice has some type of weight in our mind. And the red, yellow, and green are a way to vet out the voices and influences in your life to better understand who should you be listening to, who should you maybe be listening to but cautiously, and honestly, whose opinion should you not be listening to at all? And one of the things that we talk about through the course is this idea of, does the person giving you their perspective, advice, or whatever it may be, are they living a life that you want to emulate? And so that's really one of the first gates that people walk through. And I think we can all think of an experience in our life where we had someone tell us something that has stuck with us to now. I still have a art teacher when I was in fourth grade that told me I was not a good artist. And that voice has stuck with me forever. And then I realized one day she has no authority in my life. Right now I have my own family, my own kids that are the same age that I was at that time. And this art teacher has no authority in my life to tell me that I'm not good at art or not good at creativity or whatever it may be. But I let that silly little voice play a huge role in my life for a long time. And so what the red, yellow, and green light do are they give you gates to give you permission to turn off certain voices when they're not healthy. And so obviously your green light is someone that they're living a life that you want to emulate. They have the expertise in this area. And when they give you opinions, you should listen to them. The yellow light is someone who maybe in most areas of life you want to listen to, but in this particular area of life, their opinion doesn't weigh as much. So, I think about certain influences in my own life. And when I'm working on certain projects, man, I want to hear their voice. And then there's other times where they think they can give me some type of answer or weigh in an opinion in another part of my life that I really honestly don't want to kind of emulate theirs, whether it's finances or whether it's the way they raise their family. And it's easy for me to take that opinion in and not think, okay, actually, I don't want to listen to you in this area of my life. And then there's the red light, and that is someone that you don't want to emulate. That is someone that does not have authority to speak into your life. And there's people throughout the home buying process and throughout life that we give this authority to, and we don't have to. And the red light gives you permission to say, I'm not going to listen to you in this area of my life. I'm going to turn off that voice.
Yeah, and I think that's especially huge when it comes to family and friends, because the amount of times that I've talked to people and they say, well, my friend told me this, or my parents told me, and it's now not a good time to buy, or I shouldn't do X. That's when we start getting into decisions like we're making a choice. We're following their advice purely based on the pre-established relationship that we have, instead of actually the merit of the advice itself, right? Because like a family member can give us terrible advice and we know it's bad, but we follow it for some reason because we think we're supposed to weigh their opinion. And so when you talk about the idea of like how much weight does an idea have, I think is huge, and I think really refreshing to realize like they can still be an important person in our life.
Yeah.
Right? They can.
Yeah. In fact, I literally have a friend right now that just listed their home for sale. And the realtor came in and gave them a price, and instantly they did not agree with the price. And but that's the realtor they selected. And my friend came to me and he's like, do you think this price works for my home? And I'm like, no way. Like, we live in this area. I live in the same neighborhood as this guy. And I'm like, your house is not going to sell for that price point. And the realtor really schmoozed him into it and pushed him and pressured him. And sure enough, he green-lighted the voice. They listed their house for that price, and they've been stuck in this thing for a long time. And that's one of the problems that can come across when we green-light a voice that seems like they have the authority here. And then in certain areas, that's a time to yellow light that voice. We're going to listen to you in every other element of selling this home. But for when it comes to price, we know our home, we know our neighborhood, and you know what, we might disagree here. And we know in our gut it's going to sell for this price. And now that's not always the case, but there's just these intuitive things. And again, that's not a voice to red light. That's a voice to yellow light in this one particular area. And why I like the color coding system is it gives us this heuristic, this way to think about opinions and kind of stand on our ground and stand firm, but then also be flexible when it's someone that you want to green light. And when, even if it's a difficult truth to hear, green lighting also then helps you be a little bit more flexible when it's a tough truth to swallow.
Yeah. And I love too that you mentioned one person can have multiple things that we say green, red, and yellow to. Like you mentioned with a realtor too, because I think that happens a lot is, there are those points where we do have to weigh those decisions or that advice that somebody's giving to us or the truth that they're saying. But like you mentioned, we could green light the help that they're giving while at the same time maybe throwing a yellow or red on maybe something more like a price or something maybe even a little bit more intrinsic, maybe something about why we're wanting to move or the urgency that we have in moving. Because our goals for the families that we have, we understand those a lot better and we have more care for them and have a better idea of the direction they're going than a third party does, as much as they want to help us through that process.
100%. We actually just went through the home buying process ourselves. And our agent really kindly gave us some advice to list our house kind of before we were ready because the market was hot and it was time. And we waited, and sure enough, the market stayed hot. And luckily, we kind of yellow lighted that voice in that moment. because we knew we were green lighting at the same time what we knew was best for our family, and we're going through adoption and all kinds of crazy things happening. And again, most people, I like to think that most people are actually trying to help. You know, when people give you opinions and when people speak into your life, they're trying to help, but they're not seeing your life as wholly as you see it. And that's where the authenticity piece comes in. When you understand authentically who you are, what you're trying to achieve in life, and how to build a life you love, then it allows you to more easily put these color codes on people's voices and honestly turn off some of your own voices. There's parts of my life that opinions of myself that I have, fears, preconceived notions, judgment calls on myself, that the more authentic I become, the more I can even red light some of my own opinions and green light. You know, you sent me a text the other day, and I was feeling really down on myself, to be honest. I was feeling down on my program. I was feeling down on a lot of things. You sent me this really encouraging text actually about this concept. And I was able to kind of red light my negative thoughts and green light the positivity you sent my way. And it changed the whole momentum of my day. Yeah. So thank you for that, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's amazing to see how applicable it can be, even to ourselves. Like we can take those voices and even, you know, have those elements of red light and green light. And I think what it also does is it helps strengthen relationships in a very strange way. Because we're not seeing, I think we do this, a good example is like politics. We can label somebody as an other party, and then we throw out the entirety of that person. We say everything that you say now, because that one thing didn't align, all of it doesn't align with me. Instead of saying, actually, no, for the most part, these things that you say are green light to me, but the other things are in conflict with what I'm looking to do. And then that's okay, where we can say this is the red light, but we can still recognize we're still on a common goal. We're still all trying to achieve the same things in life for the most part. How do you red light a voice or without throwing out the idea of truth? Like, is it easy to fall into the trap of saying, I'm going to yellow light or red light a voice just because I don't like what I'm hearing? And if so, how do I actually, is there anything that I can do to measure that against what could be true so I can actually take that in, evaluate it, and process it?
Awesome question. And the thing that I find most helpful about the tool is it slows you down. And you mentioned it earlier with this like rushing river analogy. And in that analogy, sometimes we get swept up in the emotion of a moment, the emotion of a process. And what that does is it raises stress hormones in our body. It raises our stress elements. And in that thing shrinks our view down and clouds our judgment. It makes it much easier to make a bad decision. And the red and yellow and green light process actually pulls you a little bit out of that momentum and lets you take a little bit more objective stance on what people are saying, as opposed to just going off the cuff and making a snap judgment. And so, yes, it is easy to red light an uncomfortable voice. But what I would really push you to think about is when you step out of the flow of information, two things. One, is this person living a life you want to emulate? So if I have a friend like you that comes to me and says, hey, you know, you should really do blank. Like when you send me an app or when you send me a suggestion, I want to be more like you when it comes to my social presence, the way that you show up socially. So I green light it instantly. Because if you suggest it, I want to be like you there. Yes. Vice versa. If someone gives me input on my life and I don't want my life to look like theirs, that's a really easy red. And that sometimes can, you know, when it comes to truth, their truth, what they're telling me, if they're not living it out, if they're not living out the thing that they're telling me, it's easy for me to red light that.
Yeah.
On the flip side, if it is someone you want to emulate and be like, if it's a truth that comes in conflict with you, that's a really good time to pause and say, okay, before I red light this opinion, I want my life to look like theirs. If a successful father gives me advice and it's a hard truth that cuts to my core and I want to just reject it, but I really admire the father they are and I want to be more like them, that's I say red flag. When I say red flag, it's a good thing. I think about like a mailbox when you put the flag up, look inside. That means like, okay, there's something in this mailbox I want to look in. So like that puts up my mental flag that says, okay, Ethan, this guy you want to be more like gave you advice that you don't want to hear. Maybe you need to open up that mailbox and look inside and see where is the truth, because they're clearly doing something right in that area. So that's really, I would say the best way is if that person lines up with so I think about the way you carry yourself. If someone's living out the way that you want to be, and they give you advice that's really hard to hear, but they're showing up in the world in a way that you want to emulate. Man, green light that voice, even though it hurts, because
Right.
we're
Yeah.
trying consistently, and again, I go back to this concept of we're all just trying to build a life we love through the moving process, through buying a home. We're all just trying to love our life a little bit more. And sometimes our gut reaction is to protect ourselves. And honestly, when we try to protect ourselves in that way, it's usually because we're kind of, we've deviated from our most authentic self. And so we have to put up these walls, these fragile defenses of self, and stand behind
Yeah.
things. And so when people give us a hard truth, it's hard to hear.
Yeah. And another thing I love about it too is you don't have to do the reconciling in relationships that causes so much stress and energy. Because I think when I sent you that
Yeah.
text, something I was going through is I was talking with some people who were like really adamantly suggesting that I move in a direction that was like kind of entirely counter to what like my ethos, like what I wanted to do. And normally without that kind of, red light, yellow light, green light thing, what ends up happening is, like you mentioned, you weigh those voices the same. Like, well, now I have to mentally defend and counter argue those own points in my own head against myself, right? Because I
Yeah.
take those on instead of just being able to say like, oh no, I can just shut it down. I don't even have to consider it because it's red lighted. I think the same thing could happen too in the home buying process is, if I'm talking with somebody who's pushing me into something, I don't have to present counter arguments to them or to myself. I don't have to spend that energy and time and frustration doing that. If I know that that's a voice that's pushing me in a direction that I don't want to go, or a life that I don't want to emulate, I can shut it down and be okay with it. So,
Crazy way, to your point, it's actually can protect a relationship when you red light things appropriately, because you're not taking offense to what they're saying. You're just saying, yeah, I'm going to choose not to hear that opinion. I'm going to choose to not listen to you in this area, or maybe listen to you at all when it comes to this. And so, yeah, sometimes it helps you kind of sunset a relationship or a professional relationship with a realtor or with someone else. But then at the same time, it also allows you to kind of shut things off, to your point, without having to like create all this scar tissue around making an issue in a moment, because you mentally can say, okay, I can just turn that opinion off.
yeah,
And I don't have to let that sink into my core and affect my day.
yeah, I love it. What does this look like practically? Because I know sometimes I'll give advice to people when they're, if they're feeling frustrated or overwhelmed in the process. Some of the best advice and the easiest advice in the world to give is like, just take a break, take a pause. Because you mentioned that too,
Yeah.
this process forces you to take a pause. I had my therapist on earlier this week or last week, and that was one of the big things we talked about was the idea of taking a pause and feeling where you're at. Sometimes I'll tell people like, tell your realtor, hey, I'll get back to you. Today's a Wednesday, I'll get back to you Friday at 5. But I'm just going to shut everything off now and just take a break for a second. So go get a massage, take a walk, have lunch with friends, do whatever you need to do to really solidify the fact that I'm taking an intentional pause in that moment. So when you're going through this, what does this look like? Are we just mentally saying, kind of validating what these voices look like in other people? Are we actually like sending somebody something, letting them know where we're at in their opinion? Or like, what, could you help us navigate through what that looks like?
Man, you're really good at asking questions, Kyle. These are
Thanks.
great questions. So with that, one of the best ways to manage this process and to show up is to know that you control the tempo in these areas, and into your life, you control the tempo. And most people, they want to control your tempo. They want you to move faster. They want you to do, whatever it may be, because they have external factors, rightfully so, pushing them. When it comes to almost every stage of the home buying process, everyone around you benefits from the process going a little bit faster. They can do a little bit more volume. They can sell a little bit more, whatever it may be.
Yeah,
And it
usually
might
money on the other end. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I have things in my life where I benefit from tempo. And when I'm selling, I want someone to make a decision more quickly than not. On the flip side, you have to remember that you control the tempo of your life. And so you get to set those boundaries. If it's going to take you 48 hours to make a decision, take those 48 hours. And in that process, give yourself a moment. I'm a big fan of paper and pencil. Literally sit down, write the opinion and say, am I going to red light, yellow light, or green light this voice? And physically force yourself to stop and think about it. Because in doing that, again, you're regaining your internal power and you're setting your internal tempo.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, there's this old urgent / important quadrant. I think it's Covey's quadrant, I think. But most people in life spend a lot of time on things that feel urgent but aren't that important, because the sense of urgency makes it feel like it's important. And we oftentimes ignore the things that are truly important but not as urgent, because we're so used to urgency being our moniker of importance. And when it comes to the home buying process, there's a lot of things that are really, really important, but maybe don't feel quite as urgent in the process. Why you're moving, what the purpose that you're looking for, all the kind of different things that fall into that category. And those are quiet voices, and you have to give yourself space to listen to those voices, as opposed to, I love the river analogy, getting swept up in the river and the stress of the whole adventure.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned the urgency, because you talked about how sometimes the more important things don't have the urgency. Like you mentioned, like, why are we moving in the first place? What's the benefit of us moving? We don't talk through that most of the time. We think like, I just decided to move. But if we don't have that solidified, what ends up happening, and I see this happen so much, especially with this crazy market that we're in right now, is people think, I think I might be interested in buying a home. Then they go see homes, and now that urgency almost solidifies to them that I have to buy a home. When when I talk to people and talk like, you don't have to buy a home, right?
Yeah.
You've been feeling that urgency because you've been seeing homes, and then they get pending. You looked at it, and then it was pending when you showed up in the driveway. Like, that urgency was what created this false sense of I have to do something, but we didn't actually establish what that was to begin with.
Yeah. 100%. That urgency it tricks our brain into thinking that that's something that's really, really important. But there's a huge difference between urgency and importance. And one thing I want to note for everyone listening is, most people take their sense of urgency and put that on you. So if they're feeling urgent about something, you have kids running through the hall. If they're feeling urgent about something, they're going to make you feel urgent about it because it feels urgent to them. And the green, red, and yellow light are a way to pause and say, okay, this is urgent for you. This is your livelihood. You want to sell more. You want to make more. I love it. But this isn't urgent for me in this moment. And that's a classic yellow light moment.
Yeah.
You know what? At a certain point in time, our urgencies are going to align, but right now they don't.
Yeah. A good example of this too, even in like real estate marketing, is you go to Zillow and they're going to show you how many people have viewed this home or how many people have saved this home. And so that creates that false sense of urgency of like, man, 500 other people have saved this in their list or whatever. All of a sudden creates this urgency for me to move into something. And I think for some people urgency is very real. But the urgency, like you mentioned, should not be valid, should not be green lighted until we establish that sense of urgency before. We establish it intrinsically based on, we have to move because of a job relocation or because of something changing in our family. Something's happening that we have to have the urgency, not we entered into the process and the market's moving fast, so now we're urgent. Because I see so many people who are like feeling frustrated, I mean, rightly so, but their only sense of urgency is just because of everyone else's sense of urgency. And they don't realize like, we can slow down. We don't have to keep searching. We can take a week of a break. We can take a month. We can take a year. Especially for the people who are buying because it's more of a luxury, or they're buying because they're seeing everyone else do it.
I will tell you, and this is not to go into like something deeper than we intend to go to.
Oh, bring it on.
One thing that urgency does is, you'll find that there are two ways of viewing the world. There's scarcity and abundance. And urgency triggers the scarcity centers in our brain. That there's not going to be enough homes, there's not going to be enough buyers, there's a sense of not enough. And that's one of the things that urgency typically triggers within us. There's not enough time, there's not enough money, whatever it may be. Abundance is a way to slow down. It's the belief that there's going to be enough. When it's your time to find the right home, you will find the right home. There is not an option in this world where, because of some lack of urgency, you miss out on the home and you're going to live in a home that you hate for the rest of your life. That's not going to happen. There's enough abundance out there that's going to create the space if you give it time to find the home you love. And in that case, urgency tricks our brain into thinking that there is this scarcity out there. And you'll find that all the companies around us are using that urgency to trigger trigger us. That's why alerts, that's why you have so many more alerts on your phone now than you did 5 years ago, because organizations realize if I can send you an alert and make it feel urgent, or if I can put breaking news on the headline, it's going to get your attention because urgency buys us in, it reels us in, and we don't want to be the people outside of that knowledge.
Yeah, man, that's fantastic. I mean, there's a lot that I'm learning in here too. So I'm sitting here thinking like, I should be thinking of a next question to ask, but I think it's fantastic, especially the idea of like the urgency creating this false sense of importance. I think is huge, and I see those elements in my own life too, where it's like, well, when you actually step back, you're thinking, this isn't important at all. I just and I think for a lot of people kind of stumble into home ownership or into the buying process. I know a lot of people around here who they'll talk with an agent, and the agent will say, hey, there's no harm in like going and seeing a house. Like, let's go see a house. And the agent themselves isn't pushy necessarily in the more forward way, but might as well just go see a house. What's the harm in that? And they say, sure, might as well. And then they get there, and then it's, well, this home does have 3 offers in it, and they're going to make a decision tonight. So if we don't do something, then you're going to miss out on the home. And they say, well, I kind of really like the home now that we're here. I don't want to miss out on it. Now here's that urgency. I have to put in something tonight. Well, all of a sudden, I just took my entire buying process and squeezed it into a period of like 2 hours of a decision of, am I going to write an offer? It's like
100%. Again, other people's, it is something urgent for them. Other people's sense of urgency like trickles onto you, and you feel like there's this movement and this momentum that's pushing you forward. And again, that's where you have to be really in tune with your authentic self. And if you're feeling discomfort that pushes you to slow down, that's a great indicator there that there's something to look into. When you're feeling that resistance, and our brains tell us to skip that resistance. I follow this great fitness coach, and she mentioned the other day that like when you're exercising or working out and you find this, like you hit a wall, most people either double down and push through or they quit. But she said the real thing that wall is telling you is just to slow down for a minute. That's your body saying, I need a minute. Now, some like really intense people will be like, that's what you push through that wall and you break it down and you like, you run. And then other people are like, and that's when you quit. But like most of us, that's actually our biological indicator to slow down. And so to your exact analogy where you are in a house and you're feeling pressure to put in an offer, that's a perfect time to slow down. And if the house is still there tomorrow, I personally believe it's, maybe yours. But if it goes that night and you're not comfortable putting in an offer that night, it simply wasn't your house.
Yeah.
And
That's
what
I've always found is it seems like when I've been talking with a client and they don't get a house, they put in several offer after offer and they keep getting beat out or they can't find something.
Yeah.
It almost always ends up when they get under contract and they finally close on that house, they're so glad they missed out on all the other ones. And so whatever you want to attribute that to in higher power, God, whatever that looks like for you, it almost always seems to work out that way, where it's, I'm really glad that there were a bunch of these no's, that this stuff didn't work out, because this is actually a lot better for us. It just took us wading through things a little bit more and having the patience to get to that point.
That literally happened in the house I'm sitting in right now. We put an offer on another house. They dragged their feet. They didn't like the price. We kept going back and forth. It was more than we wanted to spend. And sure enough, that fell through. We were devastated. And now we're in a house that's like 15,000 times better for our family.
Yeah.
But we would have gotten in a house that we were kind of forcing into the box because we felt urgent. We were adopting, and we had all these forces making us feel really, really rushed. And as soon as we took a step back and slowed down, we found the right place. And again, that goes back to this abundance for scarcity mentality. And that's pervasive in our entire lives. And most of us, again, get forced into this scarcity mentality. And when you take a step back, you realize that the world's actually abundant, that things come back, they come back around. It's the same force that makes the grass come up every year. It's easy when winter comes and kills all the plants. It's like, well, that might be the last time I see a flower. But none of us think that, because we know the earth is abundant and it's going to come back and the flowers are going to grow again. And that's the same cycle is true in our life. But yet, again, urgency tricks us into thinking that it's untrue.
Yeah, man, I love it. If there was one thing that you could leave us with in the red light, yellow light, green light conversation, what would be the one big takeaway you want someone to take away from this?
What is the one thing to take away? You know, I think the thing that I would tell you to take away is that not all voices in your life are equal. And it's the same thing that allows us to weight all voices. If my wife tells me she likes an outfit and a friend tells me they don't like the outfit, I typically weigh those equally,
Hmm.
but I'm dressing to impress my wife, not my friend.
Right.
So her voice is much louder there. And so
Yeah.
again, I think that not all voices are equal is the net sum of the idea. Not all voices are equal, and you get to pick which voices you're letting in based on where you're trying to go in your life. And so honestly, that's my one thing, but I would circle back and say it starts there. The home buying process, all the processes in your life, before you embark on those, get clear on where you're headed. Get clear on the life that you're building. Because if you're trying to build towards something that you don't yet have clarity on, no set of choices is going to make you feel better until that clarity comes. And once that clarity comes, then it's almost hard to make a wrong choice because you're just building towards that vision for your life.
Yeah.
And that's the same with the voices.
Yeah. I love it. Man, I am so glad that you said yes, because I think not only is there good info here for the home buying process, but also a lot to chew on for just life in general. I know for the rest of the day, I'm going to be sitting here like, oh gosh.
Thanks, and that means a lot. I always love talking. You bring this out of me, so thank you. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. So how can people get in touch with you if they want to go through that coaching program? I will say a side note with the coaching program is it's not just for, I know sometimes when people hear about like coaching or courses or things like that, it can be this like really high lofty thing. It's perfectly for individuals. Like, you don't have to even be like in sales or even working for that matter, because I know you work with people in high school and college, going through life transitions and what that looks like.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would echo that totally. That if you're trying to build a life you love, Elevate Your Edge is for you. That's the process is built around giving you the mindsets, skills, and tools to do that. And with that, you can find us at elevateyouredge.com or follow us on Instagram at Elevate Your Edge. And that's how you locate us. We're also launching a podcast very soon. One episode's up, but more to come. So
awesome. Yeah, and I'll have all those links in the description too. So thank you so much, Ethan. I really appreciate your time, man.
Kyle, thank you. And I will talk to you soon.